Welcome back to Your Average Witch, where every Tuesday we talk about witch life, witch stories, and sometimes a little witchcraft. Before we get started, I just want to remind you of the All Souls celebration at the reopening of the Ninth House here in Tucson from October 31st to November 3rd. I'll be vending on Friday, November 1st, so be sure to come see me. This week I'm talking with Akuura from Aroma Sanctum. We talked about Salem witches, protection magic, and the magic of scent. Now let's get to the stories. Akuura, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. Now, I reached out to you because one of my friends, Angela, was raving about your product. She said she's been a customer for a long time and that you're a witch. And I looked and you looked really interesting. So I thought, let me ask this person. So
It's
can you
fun
please?
when people find that for me that way.
Yeah. Word of mouth is the best word.
For everything, yes.
Can you please introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and what you do and where they can find you?
Yeah, so I am Akuura Kulak. I am a perfume designer. I do mostly natural perfumes and products, an artist and an astrologer as well, and a witch and pagan sort. Kind of an eclectic pagan at this point, from Salem, Massachusetts. I know, cliche. I live in Arizona now. And I have mostly an online and mail order business now. I used to have a retail establishment in Salem for about 30 years and met people from all over the world. It was great. So now I have kind of a cult following, and I decided to semi-retire and move out here and just do the online and market myself on social, which has been an interesting journey. The website is aromasanctum.com. And you can find Aroma Sanctum perfumes on Instagram and Facebook and follow me there. I'm constantly posting stuff about what I'm making. And I have 4 different fragrance collections. They're all oil-based, so they're much better for people that have allergies and things like that. I'm always making new stuff. I used to do custom for people in the shop when I had the store in Salem, but I don't do that anymore. But you can layer a lot of my scents and create your own unique blends. And some of them are quite magical and witchy, and I've got stuff for both men and women. And natural lotions, baths, things like that. So it's a big website, and you got to kind of navigate around. If you go on the website, go to fragrance collections, and you can read about what's in each fragrance I've created and the history behind them and such. So that's where you find those.
I want to point out that Akuura and I have never met, but I'm super interested because I freaking love smells.
Oh, you're going to love my website. You can order samples, so don't worry about that.
Oh,
That's
holy
what people
crap.
do. They'll go online and order 20 samples and play around. There's very detailed descriptions of what's in each scent. And a lot of them are quite magical. People do use them for ritual use and stuff, like my Fire of Isis scent, for example, which is mostly frankincense and myrrh. So I've got a lot of interesting blends.
Do you have any that smells like a hot guy's leather jacket?
I have a lot of leather scents, yes.
Ooh,
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I
Cool.
have
I'm going to
plain
go
leather
explore.
scents, and I've got some others. Essence of Autumn is like a leather tobacco. That's just amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody
That's it.
loves
That's
that.
what I'm after.
Yeah, and Pirate is very intense, leathery, spicy scent. And I actually smelled it in a dream and then created it. That was
What?
a journey. Yeah. So that's my most leathery, kind of butch scent would be Pirate. Women wear it too. It's very spicy as well, but it's got 2 different, it's got like a black leather note and a regular leather note. So that one's pretty popular, especially with big bearded guys.
Okay, yum. I'm excited. That's fun.
Oh yeah, you'll love it.
Now, you mentioned that one of the titles you own is witch. What does it mean when you call yourself a witch?
It took me a long time to embrace the word. Maybe because I'm from Salem, the witch city, which is such a cliche. I grew up there, and they use, it's called the Witch City, and there's like Witch City Auto Body and Witch City this and Witch City that.
Really?
And there's literally a witch logo on the police cars.
That's kind of cool.
It's cool, but kind of kitschy too,
Yeah,
and I grew up with that,
totally.
and I just was like, I just really kind of was cringe calling myself a witch. But it took me a while to figure out what I was actually. I knew I wasn't a Christian. I was brought up in a Catholic family and really rebelled against it at age 7 and said, this is not for me. I'm not what you are. I just didn't know what I was. And I knew about the witch history there, but I didn't really look into what witches really are today. And it took me a while to figure that out. And this was back in the 60s and 70s because I'm older. So I came across this book in the library, I think when I was 13 years old, and it's out of print now, but I did manage to find a copy of it again. It's called The New Pagans by Hans Holzer. Now, Hans Holzer was a ghost hunter kind of person. He was pretty famous. He was on TV a lot. I think he's dead now. But in his book, he wrote this in the 70s, he is exploring people who are going back to pagan religions, including Wicca. And he traveled around the world from England and all over America, interviewing people who had covens and groups that were reviving these traditions. And they were all from, different traditions, but Wicca was a big part of them. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, I'm a pagan. Just all of a sudden I had a name, I knew what I was. And I embraced the word, more favorably after that, because I realized it was a real thing. And it wasn't just, something that I was making up in my head. But I was always very connected to nature and the seasons and the cycles of nature and all of that. So it made sense to me. And I started avidly studying at that point. And then I, really more embraced the term. Mostly I call myself a pagan more than a witch, because I have started to get into some more Norse paganism as well. But for me, it's more of a spiritual, religious thing more than a magical practice thing, but I do both.
So you mentioned coming from a Catholic family. Did witchy things happen when you were a kid?
Oh my God, I lived in the most haunted house imaginable. Salem has a lot of old houses and a lot of ghosts, and this was a family house that had been in my family for 2 generations, and it was very old. The front part of the house went back to the 1700s, and that's the part I was living in. And yeah, there were a lot of weird poltergeist kind of things going on off and on. So at a very early age, I became aware of the unseen, as you like to call it. And I was a little afraid of it, but more intrigued by it. But I also realized I had to learn more about this. And I thought it strange that some people didn't experience these things. My mother was very psychic, and she used to have premonition dreams, usually about people dying. So, of course, it scared her, and she thought it was evil. Maybe part of her thought she caused it. I don't know. But
that's sad to think about.
It was. And later when I was older, I talked to her about it, and she would tell me these dreams. I was like, this is just natural. It's just something that you know how to do, and don't be afraid of it. But she was so ingrained Catholic to think that all that stuff was evil. But I noticed right away that some people did not perceive these things, and some people did. So some of us are more open psychically, and unfortunately I was very open psychically and had a rather terrifying childhood living in that house. And that was one of the motivators for me to get into occult studies and learning about witchcraft, was to keep my sanity and protect myself from the entities that were in that house. Some were human and some were non-human.
I'm one of the not people. I kind of wish I was one, because it sounds so interesting. But I don't see or hear anything.
It's hard to live with, because you have to learn how to tune it out. And I guess it's like, mediums have it worse. They really have to learn to tune stuff out.
Yeah,
I think when you're a
magical
person,
I would think it would be neat to see things, but I don't want to be constantly like a constant barrage.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I don't usually see apparitions. I did see some later in life at another location in Salem, and it scared the crap out of me. I don't like seeing them. I can deal with feeling them around, and I can feel their energy. But seeing them as an apparition kind of freaks me out, and luckily it hasn't happened too often. But yeah, my main motivator was learning how to protect myself from, things that go bump in the night, because there was a lot of things going bump in the night in that house. I didn't sleep much till I was 12.
Oh my gosh.
Seriously.
No, I mean, I believe you. That sounds so scary for a little kid.
It was an initiation, I'll tell you. And I think it's because, magical people, whether you want to call them witches or psychics or whatever, we have a light. Our light is so bright, and entities and spirits are attracted to us for whatever reason. Dead people trying to communicate, other spirits trying to use our energy or manipulate us in some way, or just feed off our energy. And yeah, it's like, you're a flame and there's moths coming to you, and you've got to do something about it. And I figured that out at an early age.
What a good analogy. Very witchy.
Oh, yeah. I felt like the flame surrounded by moths all the time. And I'm like, why doesn't anybody else have these problems? So I really got into studying the occult when I was like 13 or so, after I read this book and said, okay, maybe there's more I can learn. And I started looking for more books, which weren't very available back then. And of course, we didn't have the internet back then, which makes things easier for people today. So I had a couple friends who were into this as well. And we embarked on the journey of studying about, occult forces, basically, and had sort of an informal little coven for a while. But yeah, the rest of my family, they just think I'm crazy. I'm sure that's true of a lot of witches.
Let's come forward to now. Can
Yeah.
you introduce us to your practice? Do you have any daily, or if not daily, any consistent things that you do ritual wise, or any other? If you don't, I don't
Um,
necessarily use the word ritual, but
yeah. It's a good word though. I mean, there's rituals of all kinds that we enact in our lives, from brushing our teeth to meditating. Um, I definitely meditate every night before I go to sleep. It seems to set me into an interesting state to dream and do stuff on the other realms. But I'll do full moon ceremonies once in a while. I'm pretty much a solitary practitioner now. When I was in Salem, I was kind of an honorary member of a few different covens. Um, Salem is complicated because witchcraft has not just become, a big thing there for practicing spiritually. It's become a business. So there are all these covens in Salem, the different factions who don't get along with each other, and that's quite interesting
ooh,
to live
witch
with.
wars.
Oh, it's witch wars big time. And I refused to get drawn into that. I had friends in all these different groups, and I just would say, you know what? I am Switzerland. I'm not getting involved in your conflicts. And I maintained friendships with all of them. I just wouldn't get drawn into their drama. And they would invite me sometimes to Sabbath rituals and stuff as a kind of honorary member, but I was never formally initiated into any of those groups. There's quite a few there. So on my own, I just do some full moon stuff. Some of the major Sabbaths like Yule and Samhain, I'll do a little ritual at home, but it's not compulsory in my mind. If I feel like I need to do it, I will. I wish I had more of a group here. There are some Facebook groups here that I've hooked up with, so we'll see. Maybe we'll end up forming a group here. They're very kind of closeted here, but there's more of them than I thought. It's kind of interesting.
How would you say witchcraft has changed your life, or would you?
I wouldn't say it's changed my life as much as validated my life, because I don't know, I guess a good analogy would be a gay person who didn't know they were gay and finally knows they are and comes out of the closet and feels comfortable with themselves. And I think that's what being a witch did for me, is made me accept the side of myself that other people might think is weird, that I realize now is a natural thing. It does empower you. It did empower me to a point of feeling, a little more control in my life. And we can't control our lives completely, obviously, but feeling like you have an edge of either knowing what's going to happen or how you can change things a little for the better sometimes. I think that gives you a little edge. And I think that's why a lot of people, I think, get into witchcraft, because they want to empower their lives.
I agree. Based on what I've heard people say when they answer this question, I super agree.
Oh, I bet you get a lot of that. Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest motivator in your practice, and has it changed since you first started?
Oh, it's changed big time. I think my first motivator was survival, like I said.
Yeah.
From all that childhood stuff, it's like, I got to stop these things from attacking me in the night, That was the first motivator. But for me, it's more about knowledge and learning. I'm an Aquarian, and we're know-it-alls, and we want to know everything, and we're curious about everything. And I just never want to stop learning on anything that I do. And that's why the perfume business is so fascinating to me, because you never stop learning that. There are always new things that you can put together and make. Astrology is another one. I study astrology for the rest of my life, because there's just constantly new data coming up and things to learn. And same with the occult studies. What more can you know? What more can I know about the universe and how it works? That fascinates me. So that's my main motivator now, is just learning more.
I love that. What would you say is your biggest struggle with witchcraft?
I think my only struggle is recent, moving here and having to be somewhat closeted. I'm not used to that. Most people probably are that are witches. But coming from Salem, Massachusetts, you can walk around in a black cape with a giant pentacle around your neck 365 days a year, and no one's going to look at you weird. You can really be out. That's why a lot of people want to move there and stuff. But in most places, you've got to be a little more discreet, and I'm just not used to that. I'm used to being really out with it. And here, people are fairly Christian, and I've made a lot of great friends here who accept me and have started to figure out that I'm, not a churchgoer. And I don't want to lose friends or alienate people, so I'm kind of just more discreet than I usually am about it.
It's interesting that this conversation, well, I have this friend group and a new person joined the group in the past like 2 days, and they asked, or someone asked, I don't remember which one, what it was like when we came out. And so we were talking about that last night, and it never occurred to me that people in Salem weren't ever in the closet. That's
But we
so
were for a
interesting to
while. We
me.
were for a while. I mean, when I was a teenager, it was
I
a
mean, in my
thing.
lifetime.
Yeah, it wasn't a thing. There weren't any witch shops. It was a quiet little town. You got a few tourists to come see the House of Seven Gables on a bus, and that was it.
And then the craft happened.
And then, well, Lori Cabot came to town. She lived right near me on Derby Street, and she became the official witch of Salem. She's like this public figure. She's pretty old now. She pretty much
Hmm.
stays at home as a recluse now, but she's written a lot of books and taught a lot of classes, and she has a huge following. And that's when witchcraft really became a thing in Salem. And now there's like 20 witch stores. I call it the Witches Shopping Mall. And people flock there. Like right now, it's so crowded you can't move there. I mean, you can't even walk the streets or drive or anything. It's just
That's what
ridiculous in
I
October.
hear.
And I made a lot of money in October, but I got really tired of it. I had to leave. I had a good time for a while, and then it became unmanageable. It just became way, way too much. But before that, I mean, our little group, we were pretty discreet, and we either foraged for herbs in the woods or grew our own. And any witch supplies we needed, like ritual tools or anything, we had to order them from mail order catalogs, like
Yes,
Magical
like the
Child
back
in
of
New
a
York
book.
City. Yeah, Magical Child was like the mall for the witch stuff. You could get your incense and your tools and whatever there and make your own. But there were no witch shops or anything like that in Salem, and it was still pretty under the table, so to speak. And now it's just all over the place. And there's obviously average people who live there too who are kind of annoyed by the whole thing.
I
It's become so
imagine.
commercial. And a lot of them go away. They just go away for 2 weeks, like the people in New Orleans. They don't want to deal with the crowds. But,
Yeah, I live because the Tucson Gem Show happens, and
oh,
man,
I've never
that
been to
2
that
weeks.
yet, but I
Oh,
imagine
you
that's the
have to
same
come.
type
You
of
have to
thing. Yeah.
come. It is really fun, but man, the tourists.
Oh, yeah. I'm kind of afraid to go to that because I know I'm going to come home with 6-foot amethyst geodes for my house.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a little afraid to go to that gem show, but I'll get there. I'll get there eventually.
If you come down, I'll buy you some tacos.
There you go. We'll meet up for sure.
I'm really interested in hearing the answer to this question. Do you ever experience imposter syndrome about your practice?
I actually don't know what that is. That was kind of a strange question, and I had to think about it. I don't think I have any self-doubt. I've always known what I am. It's not, I think when people come to it later, maybe, or they've tried other religions first and then get into witchcraft, maybe they do. I never have. I've just been like, yep, this is what I am. I don't have any problems with it.
That's cool.
I mean, I have witch friends who are former Mormons. They've had a lot of deprogramming to do, and maybe
Yeah.
they have some self-doubt. Oh, the rain's getting loud here. Hopefully it's not
Oh,
going
I
to...
can hear it. That's neat.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's coming down here.
What brings you the most joy in your practice?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I feel like when I connect with these spiritual entities, the gods, or whatever you want to call them, it's just such a joyful experience. And I do connect with them more than I ever connected with, Jesus or, anything else. And for me, that's the joy of it. And just feeling the forces of nature when they move. And I don't know the whole thing, but I think really just connecting with what you'd call the gods, I guess. They make their presence known.
That's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
What is something that you did early on in your practice that you don't do anymore, and why don't you do it?
I used to do more really full-on ceremonial magic type stuff when I was younger, with all the paraphernalia and all the preparation. And I don't know, people still do it and they like it. I've kind of grown beyond that, where I don't need to do it anymore. It's enjoyable, but I don't need to do it anymore. So I've kind of let go of a lot of the ritual trappings, so to speak. And for me, it's become very simple. If I need to manifest something, I can just go into a meditative state and do that without having all the paraphernalia, but I still have it because it's fun. I just don't do as much of the detailed stuff as I used to do. And, I used to hear all these people would come to my shop in Salem. They're like, oh, I'm looking for this certain oil because I have to do this spell, and they can't find it anywhere, and I didn't have it, and they're all discouraged. And I says, you can substitute something else. And they're just really shocked because it's all in the mind. This energy, this power that we're using, it's really all in the mind. These other things they're just little, I call them toys more than tools to focus the mind. And for beginners, they do need to focus their mind with certain smells and colors and whatever. But as you get more advanced, you really don't need that. And they would always be shocked when I would say that, like their spell's not going to work if they don't have this special oil or herb or whatever. And I says, you don't need any of it, actually. But they're so ingrained to believe that they do. Maybe they're watching too many TV shows. I don't know.
It reminds me of being a teenager and putting on makeup.
Yeah.
I don't wear makeup anymore, but it was really fun when I did.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, actually. It is. And I think people get into it. I see a lot of younger witches, not to disparage them, but I see a lot of younger witches experimenting with it and getting into it. And that's the fun part for them, is playing with all the toys.
Yeah.
And some of them think it's just that. And I think some of them are just playing a game that's like make-believe to them. And then something happens. Something actually happens.
Yeah.
And they freak out and run away. I have seen this. And some of them go back to, Jesus or whatever, because they get scared, because I think part of them maybe doesn't want to believe that these forces are real. The toys are fun, but you don't need them.
Speaking of toys, what is your favorite tool?
My favorite tool, as far as physical objects, I don't really have a physical tool that's my favorite. I play around with crystals, tarot cards, runes, pendulums, things like that. I would say my favorite tool that I use most consistently is astrology, which isn't really part of witchcraft, but it's a great insight into the cycles of life. It's like I like to call it a cosmic weather report. And I do astrology for clients. And if you have an accurate natal chart, you can predict all these things for the person and follow the cycles in their life. And it's incredibly accurate. And there's more and more research being done now with, of course, computers and databases about astrology that's becoming really more and more interesting. So, yeah, it's something I always go to and look at for, things that are going on in my life and other people's lives. And I find it to be a very valuable tool and a guide to whatever you're going to do, whether it's on the mundane world or the magical world.
Do you ever feel like you have any magical slumps or low periods?
I think everybody does, because we get busy in the mundane world. People have to, I moved across the country. That was a big deal. That kind of put my routines on askew for a while, but I don't ever feel disconnected from it.
How do you pull yourself out of it?
I don't think I've ever really been disconnected to it. It's, I practice less, obviously, when I'm busy and stuff, but it's like a daily thing. I just feel the energy around me all the time. It's not like I have to go do something fancy to get me back into it. So that's a question that probably doesn't really apply to me. I guess other people might go through that.
What is something you wish was discussed more in the witch community?
Oh, that was a great question. Protection. And not only because of my history, growing up in that scary haunted house, but generally, people get into this, I think, without utilizing protection as much as they should. Even if they're studying with other people, it's just not emphasized as much as it should be. And I think people that have a lot of energy and light and power, they are going to attract certain forces on other planes that can be dangerous. Again, the moths to the flame analogy. Some of those moths are nasty. And then sometimes it's people that, other people's energy in groups that have to, that are manipulative, that want to control and manipulate their followers, almost like, crazy gurus do with their followers. And I don't see a lot of people learning that in the beginning of their practice, which I think is a mistake. I think that's number one. Just like martial arts, the first thing you learn is how to block and how to fall without getting hurt.
Oh, I want to do that.
So there's an analogy, because I did Kung Fu for quite a long time. So before you start learning how to do the fancy kicks and playing with swords, you have to learn those things first.
Yeah, how
Otherwise,
not
you're
to
going to
get
get
punched in the
killed.
face.
Right. Yeah. And how to get up. If someone knocks you down, how to roll and get up so that they don't skewer you with their sword. You have to learn these things. And I feel like a lot of the witches today that are getting into it are not learning these protection techniques as much as they should be, depending on what group they're studying with or what they're reading. And I think it's really, really important. A book I always would recommend to people, because all of these younger witches would come to me for advice and stuff too, and be like, "Oh, this is happening. I don't know what to do, and I'm freaking out." And I'd be like, "Well, it's not my time or expertise to, or duty to help you right now because I'm busy, but you can read this book and it will help you." And I think they're just lazy and they don't want to read the book sometimes. But the one I always recommend, and it's a classic, it's Dione Fortune's Psychic Self-Defense, which is still in print. I think it was first printed in the 1940s. She's dead now.
Wow.
She was a famous occultist and mixed mystic. She belonged to, I believe, the Golden Dawn and some of those higher ceremonial magic groups. And she wrote a lot of fiction too. And her fiction books are really interesting because they draw on mythological, legends and magical practices. And she weaves a lot of magical practice into her novels. But this book is her only, I think it's her only, she wrote 2 or 3 that were nonfiction, and this is one of them. And it just goes into really basic techniques of how to protect yourself from all kinds of nasty spiritual things, be they demons or dead people or humans trying to manipulate you with their energy. I mean, it's a really good basic book. It's a bit antiquated and quaint to read because, she was still very Victorian in her attitude. So it's amusing, but very good, solid knowledge and practices and how to diagnose what's going on. If you've got, poltergeist activity or weird stuff happening in your house. I mean, it's all about how to diagnose and divine what is going on and how to fix it and how to protect yourself in the future. And I think it should be like Witch 101 for most people that are getting into it who don't have a really experienced mentor.
Have you heard of the TV show called Evil?
I have not seen it yet.
I kind of wonder if the showrunners or the people who write have read that.
I bet they have. I have to watch it now.
That's so interesting.
Oh, she
Now I'm
covers
gonna have to look
everything
it
from
up.
possession to psychic vampires. She
Yeah,
covers.
she
That
sounds
covers
really.
everything. Oh, it's a really interesting book, and most people don't know about it. Or younger witches, of course, don't know who she is. I mean, I'm a little older, so I remember these people, and have studied, Aleister Crowley and all these other people that were from that era. They had a lot of good knowledge there. But it's pretty practical, easy, to follow, and fascinating to read. Just, even if you're not a witch, you'd find it fascinating to read.
Think of the 3 biggest influences on your practice, whether it's a person or a pet or a deity, smell, thought, process, whatever. Thank them for the effect they have on your practice.
It was hard to pick 3, I'll tell you. I've always been connected to ancient Egypt and Isis. I've had past lives in Egypt, actually, and my name comes from one of my past lives. I took it back from Egypt. So that was one of the major influences. And there was a lot of, speculation that a lot of the Wiccan ritual and belief comes from ancient Egypt, which is fascinating. The book, of course, that I told you about, The New Pagans, that kind of changed my life and made me realize that, yes, this is what I am and it exists. After that, yeah, it's hard to say. I read a lot of, Sybil Leek. She was a quite famous British witch back in the day. Wrote some books in the 70s, and this is when there wasn't much available to learn from back then. But those were big influences on me. Just realizing that, yeah, there were people out there doing this, and that it was not just something that was, in my imagination. So I think those were the biggest influences. But I've always had a connection to ancient Egypt, and I still do.
What advice do you have for witches just starting out?
Read Psychic Self-Defense. Definitely. Witch 101. There's so much information available now that was not before, beyond books. We have the internet, and of course you got to sift through stuff on the internet of what's good and what isn't. But I think it's easier for younger or new witches to find like-minded people now because of the internet and meetup groups and things like that. And that is definitely something I would suggest. They just have to be careful who they get involved with. But yeah, it's mostly about reading a lot. You've got to study a lot. And I think a lot of people are lazy and don't want to do that. The Norse religion in particular, the Norse pagans, they require a lot of book study. It's like Bible study for Christians. They really want you to learn the sagas and all this stuff. And a lot of people are very put off by that. But as far as general Wicca and witchcraft, yeah, there's just a lot of reading to do and taking your time with things, not rushing into stuff.
Now that you've answered the questions and seen what it's like to talk with me, who would you like to hear answer these questions?
My friend Jack Cabot Civitarese, she is a witch of the Cabot tradition. She's a high priestess in that group. She's a good friend of mine, but quite a fascinating person as well. She's a seamstress. She makes magical robes and clothing and regular clothing as well. She's done weddings and whatever. And she's also a psychic and a reader and just learning astrology. She's a fascinating person. And she has spent a lot of time in the Salem community as well. She's in the Boston area. Had a lot of interesting experiences too. I think she'd get a kick out of it, and I think you'd get a kick out of her. She's on Facebook. You can find her there.
Nice. Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up? Anything I didn't ask? Anything happening with you? Any questions you had for me?
I've been pretty busy lately. I do astrology off and on, like I said, but at this point, my other business is so busy, I don't have time to do astrology. Probably not till January. The perfume business, Aroma Sanctum perfumes, I do have a big sale coming up. I do it, it's like an early Cyber Monday sale. I do it the week before Thanksgiving. And I will be posting about that on my social media. And I probably will run it for 2 days this year just to see what happens. It's a big flood of business, but that's a good way to take advantage of the sale and try some new oils and different things. And I have little sample gift sets that are available and things like that. So that will be coming up in November.
Nice. So the last two things I ask of my guests, thing number one is please recommend something. It doesn't have to be witch related, just something cool that you're really into this week.
Oh, what am I into this week? I've been working so much for like a month. Oh, it's hard to say.
I'm going to throw one out real quick. This might horrify some people, but Little Debbie Christmas tree cakes are back out. So go get you a box, everyone.
That's funny. I mean, I did go up, I just like to hike and ride horses here too in Arizona. That's one of the reasons I moved here. I would definitely recommend, checking out Sedona at some point if you're in this area. It's a very magical place. I try to get up there about once a month.
Ooh.
It's kind of my new spiritual place. Unfortunately, it's become very touristed and very crowded, much like Salem, so you have to prepare for that. There is a Facebook page called Sedona, Arizona, The People's Suggestions, and that's a good one to look on for advice.
Cool.
If people want to check that out. But their vortexes there are so powerful, and you experience so many interesting things there. I certainly have. I came out here on vacation a few times and just fell in love with the place and said, I have to go live near Sedona somewhere at some point. So I go up there about once a month now. It's kind of my magical place. I used to be very connected to the ocean. It's kind of funny. And now it's like the Red Rock fever, they call it. So I go back to that a lot.
And the last thing I ask is for a story. It doesn't have to be witchcraft. It can be whatever. I just like stories.
I have a million stories, from Salem, obviously. I might have to put them all in a book at some point. I'm thinking about it because, it's an insider's view of, growing up in Salem and everything that happened there. But so many things would happen, especially, in the October season, we'd have people from all over the world. And when I started my business, I moved my business 4 times before I finally settled down into my own space downtown, which was great. But I used to share space with other businesses. So when I first started out in the mid-90s, I had a little corner in this kind of curious bookstore, as I used to call it, called Black Cat Books, which unfortunately isn't there anymore. But it was a very eclectic little space. She had antiques and antique books and used occult books and jewelry. And there was, a friend of ours, Andrew, was in there doing readings. And then I had my little corner doing the oil. So it was a really interesting little bookstore. And there were couches. People could hang out and talk and, read books. So all kinds of people used to come in, from tourists to antique book collectors. It was a fascinating little place. And one October, during the busy season, I had this lady come in, and she was browsing around, and could hear her talking, and I was like, oh, an eccentric British lady, how fun. She'll probably buy some stuff. And she was a big woman. She was wearing this flowered dress, and she had this huge, elaborate flowered hat on. She looked really kind of fun and eccentric. So she finally came over to my counter and was studying things very intently and looking at all my bottles of oils. And I had a little sign there that had my business name on it. And she finally said, Aroma Sanctum. Sanctum of what? Sanctum of the devil. And she just had this fit. And the owner of the store and I were kind of horrified. We didn't even know what to do. She was ranting and screaming about Jesus and damnation, and it was incredible. The few customers that were in the store left because they thought she was completely insane, and we didn't even know what to do. I mean, do we call an ambulance or the police? And we finally started to try to escort her out. She said, get your hands off me. She was carrying on. I guess she had seen too many witchy things in the little time she was there, and that was the last straw, and she thought it was the sanctum of the devil. Or I says, lady, I'm just trying to sell some perfume.
Why would you in a witch
It was something I
store?
will
Oh, wait,
never
you said it was in
forget. I will never forget that lady. I think she did it in a few stores. I heard later she just would have these complete meltdowns, like she was having an epileptic fit or something.
Maybe she
was
was.
possessed. I don't know.
What in the world?
But yeah, that was one of the weirder things that I never will forget. That just makes me laugh to this day. The crazy British lady with the
People are wild.
fear of witchcraft walking around Salem.
Oh, yeah, why are you?
I don't know.
Why are people?
We used to get some scary people. We used to get a group from New Hampshire, Christian group. They were banned. The police finally banned them from coming to Salem because they were causing so much trouble. They were wearing T-shirts saying "Terrorists for Jesus." I'm not kidding.
That's bats. That's
Jesus,
some bad shit
well,
stuff.
Jesus must be annoyed, right? But they would actually try to disrupt business, like pulling people out of line, waiting in to get in stores, things like that, and be rather aggressive. And they were arrested a few times, and they were finally banned from Salem. So we used to get all kinds there. But yeah, that lady was something I'll never forget. I wish I had a picture. She was very, she's like something you see in a British sitcom, Very funny.
Good night.
Oh, yeah. We laughed about that for a long time.
I just don't understand.
I could make my friend laugh by just saying that. Sanctum of the devil! We would just go off.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really glad Angela recommended reaching out.
This was fun.
I just said, hey, I'm going to do this because I really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, yeah. It was fun. Yeah. I'll come back on sometime if you want. And if I come to Tucson, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Everybody make sure you go down in the show notes, click and follow, go buy a bunch of perfume because everybody knows, you like to smell good.
Oh, yeah. And these will not give you a headache or make you sick. I have very loyal customers. I have a cult following all over the world, and a lot of them are people who cannot wear regular perfumes.
See,
they can wear my oils, and that's how I got into it. I'm allergic to almost everything. So they're very safe. Yeah.
Then everybody go click. I command it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, see you on the internet. Bye.
All right. Happy selling.
Akuura, welcome to Hive House. I have some cards in my hand. Please say when.
Oh, when?
What is your favorite holiday and why?
I'd have to say Samhain just because of my history in Salem and the whole magic of autumn in New England. It's just something that will always be different. What goes into it. It is a rather obscure art.
Yes.
And some people would ask me a lot of questions. They'd come into the shop and spend all day there, picking my brain. But a lot of people just take it for granted that, I don't know, they just magically appear out of thin air or something. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of experimenting. I call it alchemy.
It kind of is.
It is alchemy, and it's a very hard it's a very hard art to do because you're trying to capture an essence of something and not just the smell. You're trying to capture and portray a mood with a smell. And it's a lot more difficult than portraying a scene on canvas.
To hear more of the members-only episode, head over to crepuscularconjuration.com. The monthly magic tier will give you access to the monthly Magic Marco Polo group, the private Facebook group, and access to the written monthly spells. There's also Crepuscular Conjurations, giving you bonus podcast episodes, coloring pages, guided meditations, spellcrafting videos, printable downloads, and a lot more. The free Witchy Wonderment level will give you a little sample of everything I just mentioned. You can also visit my shop, Clever Kim's Curios, to get spell boxes one at a time or by monthly subscription, intentional handcrafted jewelry that I make especially for witches, and handmade altar tools. You can even listen to the full Your Average Witch podcast library, including show notes and transcripts. Check it out at crepuscularconjuration.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Your Average Witch. You can find us all around the internet on Instagram at Your Average Witch Podcast, facebook.com/groups/hivehouse, at www.youraveragewitch.com, and at your favorite podcast service. If you'd like to recommend someone for the podcast, like to be on it yourself, or if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, send an email to youraveragewitchpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next Tuesday.